it makes me take a step back and say, well,
Mhm.
hold on now. Don't forget that you're just as guilty.
Right.
Before you wish
Plenty
on
of
them,
motivation to humble yourself. Plenty of
yes,
motivation to pray for your enemies. Plenty of motivation to stay on your knees. Plenty of motivation to have patience with your
to
brother.
genuinely want better for your enemy,
Right.
for those that oppose you.
Right.
Because if I say that they are worth punishment, then I'm condemning myself the more.
Welcome to Acts 2 and 42. Real discussions, real opinions, real stories and testimonies, real church talk. Welcome to Acts 2 and 42. All right, guys, welcome back to Acts 2 and 42 podcast. Thanks for listening today. I got T here with me. I want to almost say that this one, he may kind of fly solo. I'm just going to kind of give him the launching pad to share what was on his mind, what's on his heart or whatever, if you will. And I don't know, just ask some kind of follow-up questions, to help piece together
Hmm.
um what it is that you're trying to present. And so if you've started watching this, you obviously know the main subject, the topic is praying for your enemies, what it takes to pray for your enemies, what that means. And so I'll just dish it right off and just see where you want to go from here as far as um praying for your enemies. We know the infamous, oh, I'm gonna pray for you,
Hmm.
church folks, and I'll say church folks, not believers, not Christians, but religious people that attend church. We've heard several statements that are like facetious
Hmm.
and malicious, that are like, oh, I'm gonna pray for you because I'm ticked off at you right now. You're gonna get what's coming to you,
Yeah, it's more like I'm gonna
or
pray the Lord gets you.
right. And it's because they can't cuss you out in the moment, and that's what they want to do. So they find this like sanctified way to say something slick to you. So we're not talking about praying for your enemies like that. Like, you're
Hmm.
my enemy. Oh, I'm gonna pray for you. So what exactly, is praying for your enemies?
Well, in regards to the actual, and not intent, but meaning of praying for your enemies, I think that there's a spirit of not only humility but recognition, that must take place in order to truly and purely pray for your enemy. Um, when you recognize that, first, kind of backtrack, many of us don't have enemies. We have people that
True.
they either don't like us, people that we don't like, and even in that, there's people that don't like us for just cause,
Hmm.
for things that we have done and for things that are questionable about our character that many times we don't want to accept
Hmm.
or acknowledge.
We talked about
Um,
this a little bit with trials and tribulations.
mhm,
Um, yeah, some of it you brought on yourself. Christ hanging on the cross, he didn't do that.
mhm,
He didn't do anything to deserve that. That's different.
yeah.
So yes,
So
similar.
we have people that don't like us, um, and I think many times we jump to, well, they hate me, or that's my enemy. I'm gonna pray for you. When that's, I don't. I think it minimizes actual enemies and those who have actual enemies
Hmm.
when you conflate someone that doesn't like you with your enemy.
Right.
The scriptures were very clear to pray for your enemies, and these were people who were literally at jeopardy of being killed by the ones that they were
Yep.
telling you to pray for,
Right.
and by implication themselves praying for. But I think part of it is realizing that outside of societal bounds, so outside of societal boundaries and restrictions, there's really not much that separates your character from the character of your enemy, or the person that dislikes you.
Well, they're
There,
evil,
yes, there's,
and I'm good.
yeah, no, there, we often say we often put ourselves in the place of the victim, the good guy,
Right,
and the person that opposes us is always the evil one.
right.
Um, when in all actuality, if there's anything good about us, it's it's something that is not
Mhm,
it's something that we haven't cultivated ourselves.
mhm,
It's something that was there present even before us, before our birth, something that's been placed in us inherently.
mhm.
Because without societal bounds, we're evil.
Right.
Without someone saying, don't do this, we would do it. And the history of the world shows us that.
Most of the time we do it even though it
Hmm.
says don't do it.
Yeah.
Society, a rule, a law, the Bible,
Yeah.
whatever a standard is, most time we do that anyway.
Hmm.
So imagine without it.
Yes.
Yeah,
It were,
which is the point you're making,
you
you know?
have nothing to say that this is wrong.
But
Don't
peop
go there.
but people are generally good, right?
No.
Why not? Because of that reason. When we just,
I think that I think people believe they are good
Mhm,
because I think we have a poor perception. I don't think we have perspective. I think we have a poor perception of um, history and what men are without,
mhm,
whether it's Judeo-Christian principle or without boundaries, without restrictions.
right.
But we believe that we're good. There's a quote that the world isn't. We think the world is good versus evil, but it's actually good versus good. It's people who think they're good versus other people who think they're
Oh,
good.
yeah,
When in actuality, we're all very. If a man were to take
yeah,
into account his own self,
yep.
the secret places of his own heart, and be honest about where he is inside, you'd realize that there isn't anything different between you and the person you detest the most.
Right, right.
There are things that, if given the opportunity and the time and the circumstance and the society, you would be the very person that you detest. So understanding that, I
We're looking across the table thinking that it's me versus the opposition when it's practically a mirror,
yes,
you know? Mankind outside of what deed or what vice or whatever it is, but evil's evil.
hmm
If you're a Christian, um, or a Jew, you know that to offend one law is to offend the law, period.
hmm
So either way, we've got evil on both sides of the table.
yeah,
At least the inherent potential capability in and most times selfish causes. We're fighting our own battle. We're fighting our own cause. We're looking to further our desires, our
hmm
thing, and that's like you said, when it's not good versus evil, it's good versus good
hmm
because they believe that their cause is just and righteous, and they're fighting the good fight or whatever,
hmm
Um, so they're actually in many regards, maybe not all, but in many regards, it's almost a mirror. It's
yeah,
almost a carbon copy on the other side of the table. When we call them the enemy, they call us the enemy,
hmm
and we technically are enemies because we're both like if it was kingdoms, I'm trying to further my kingdom, you're trying to further yours.
yeah. And there's a
Both doing the
clash.
same exact thing,
Yep.
and inside and in nature, we have the same exact nature.
hmm
Just slightly different vices, different offenses, different whatever. Um, so that kind of I think the spirit of that is what you're getting at is the first thing that understanding that and recognizing that does is it levels the playing field.
Yes.
So, but without me esteeming myself and looking at everyone else that challenges me um, as evil, looking at myself and esteeming myself as, oh, like you mentioned, like the good guy, and they're just the one trying to stop me. Oh, it's Satan.
Yeah.
Satan's doing this to me. He's doing that to me. And it's because this person disagrees with me or because this person, contends with whatever it is I'm doing. So we look through that lens that I'm the good guy, they're the bad guy, therefore they're wrong,
hmm
I'm right. This is what should be done, is what I'm fighting for, and God's on my side.
Yeah.
And if they do you wrong, and especially the more carnal we are, obviously, the less capable I think we are to actually pray for enemies or to see it through the proper lens, because it takes carnality to see that, to see it the way I just described it, the way you're describing it. That's carnality 101,
Mhm.
you know. Um, and what you're saying is to look outside of that.
Yeah, and to understand that, like you said, there's a mirror that they're outside of, in the case of Christians, and I would venture to say in a general sense, outside of what I believe to be Christ has placed in you, the good outside of that good,
Mhm.
those restrictions, or you can say society. Outside of that, you two are virtually the same.
Right.
You would do the same things. And when you understand that, it makes you a little more humble
Mhm.
when praying for your enemy, because you understand that the only thing that separates you from them is him. Outside of that, outside of
Mhm.
the good that
Right.
he's placed in you that separates to a degree. That's because even we are scarcely saved.
Mhm.
Even we barely escape judgment. Um, and I think it speaking of judgment, it takes an understanding of judgment, of the things to come for his enemies.
Mhm.
Paul said, "Therefore, knowing the terror of the Lord, we persuade men." When you know that the Lord comes to execute judgment,
Right.
and you know the judgment,
Right. Right.
you're not eager to pray that God gets your enemy, and you know that you barely escape the judgment.
Right.
You're actually praying that God saves them.
Mhm.
You know, the Lord from heaven on the cross said, "Father, forgive them,
Right.
for they know not what they do."
Right.
Any
Which
man knowing the judgment would any man knowing full well the judgment that will come upon him for his
Mhm.
wrong
Right.
would not consciously do the wrong.
Right.
Will not be eager to do the wrong.
I was getting ready to say that's viewed, and oftentimes things that Christ says and does, or said and did, if we're reading in past tense what's written in the Gospels. But the things he said and did is viewed as, well, that was Christ.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Like he was, a superior man, which truthfully he was, but that doesn't change that from being the standard. Doesn't
No,
change that from being the way.
we have the first martyr after Christ, Stephen,
Right.
saying the same thing
Right.
while being stoned.
A human being.
Lay not this sin to their
Yep.
charge, because we understand what is to come.
Yep.
And when you understand the judgment, it's not, Lord, get them.
Mhm.
It's, Lord, please don't get them.
Right.
What did Moses do when they sinned against the Lord?
Right.
Said, look,
Let
let
me
me
let
get it,
me. Yeah. Yep.
or punish me. And it wasn't, Moses wasn't eager for the people to be punished,
Right.
understanding the wrath of the Lord. Lot wasn't eager
Right.
for the men of Sodom and Gomorrah to be punished,
Right.
understanding the terror of the Lord. There's Christ, Stephen, the apostles. They weren't eager for men to be punished,
Right.
and neither is God. He's not willing that any man should perish.
Right.
So even the Lord's not eager to punish.
Right.
Now he's just to do so after long suffering
Right.
because of the terror
Right.
which comes with it.
Right. So, hmm, if if we have, or at least are supposed to have,
Hmm.
his spirit, and this is what his spirit understands and also desires, um, then, like Christ hanging on the cross, like Stephen being stoned, people that are spiritually minded
Hmm.
or have that spiritual insight, not are wholly divine, but have that spiritual insight, they're going to understand things, see things that way. They're not going to have carnality get in the way,
Hmm.
and hatred overriding, spiritual common sense. Um, so they're going to have the mind of God and not wish ill,
Hmm.
just like God doesn't wish ill. You
I
know,
mean, if we understand Christ is, or God is the head of Christ, Christ is the head of the man. Christ makes intercession for us who have
Mhm.
offended. And even after conversion, who still offend, whether it's the things knowing or unknowing, we still offend. He still makes intercession for us. why would we not be making intercession for those who offend us?
Right.
Are their offenses greater than ours to God?
Right.
And I think when we don't have a not a tendency, but when we're not inclined to genuinely pray for our enemies, for those who offend us,
Mhm.
and even because we do have brothers who have actual enemies. We have brothers who are being firebombed, who are
Mhm.
being killed for their faith. And I try to be careful because it's easy from this seat,
Mhm.
to say pray for your enemies.
Oh, yeah. Mhm.
But I don't think their situation negates or disproves the
Mhm.
rule that look, this is what our Lord said. This is what the
Right.
apostle said. This is what the spirit that we're supposed to inherit
Right.
teaches us.
And we ought to at least strive for.
Yes.
We shouldn't be happy basking in vengeance.
And that's what I see a lot of. It's there's a word which is sounds like a phrase, called schadenfreude, which is to take pleasure from another's woes. And when you hear it,
Getting
it's
all scholastic on me. Say that again.
schadenfreude.
Okay.
It means to
He just made that
derive
up.
pleasure.
He
Yeah,
just made that up.
it's to derive pleasure
Okay.
from another person's woes.
Okay.
And I don't think that we understand how much as as
Why
religious
would you want
people,
something bad to happen to somebody?
and we do,
Sorry.
we wait for the judgment. Many times over, as a community, I've heard it many times over. I can't wait till this is over, till the
Right.
Lord gets them, till the Lord rains down fire.
Right.
And you're literally taking pleasure in the destruction.
Right.
How many of the prophets said, woe to you that wait that day?
Yeah.
It's
Yep.
not a good day.
Right.
Jeremiah seen it coming,
Yep.
warned the people when it came, he was weeping in tears and lamentations
Right.
because of what he saw.
Right.
It's never a good thing. And it's not something that someone who understands their own morality, their own immorality, their own mortality, excuse me, their own immorality, and the fact that it's only the just one that has separated you
Mhm.
from the judgment,
Right.
but who was also able to separate them from the judgment. It's only when you understand that you'll actually weep before God saying, Lord, forgive them.
Right.
Because if they're not worthy of forgiveness, then neither am I.
Right.
You know, and this is why I often pray, not that you hear my cries, not that you grant me this or you grant me that, but man, just save me.
Right.
Help me, because if you don't help me, I'll perish.
Right.
If you don't do it, I won't make it. They won't make it if you don't do it.
Right.
If you did it for me,
Right.
then they have a chance.
Right. And if I want to pray for you. I want God to save you. I want God to be there for you. And if he is, me knowing the evil that you've done to me knowing that you are evil, and if God redeems you, if
Mm.
God, vindicates you, if God esteems you, if God blesses you, if God prospers you, then I know there's hope for me.
Mhm.
Not that there should be selfish ambition, but judge not lest you be judged. For the
Mhm.
same measure that you judge, it'll be judged back to you. So if I want forgiveness for you, Mark 11 chapter, when you stand praying, forgive. Because if you don't forgive, the Father doesn't forgive you. So it's like whatever measure, whatever attitude I have towards my brother or my neighbor. Terry had mentioned it yesterday when I told him what we wanted to talk about. Since he's not here in his absence, I'll share, what he had chimed in. He was like, um, the two greatest commandments, love the Lord thy God, and to love your neighbor as you love yourself.
Mhm.
So if your neighbor offends you, well, if you love him,
Mm.
just like you love you, right?
Mhm.
You don't want to suffer. You don't want to go to hell, whether it's, long-term suffering, whether it's, or immediate. You want forgiveness.
Mhm.
So you have to want that for your enemy first. You have to want that for your brother first. Because whatever they get, whatever
Mhm.
you want for them and whatever they get. And that's why I wanted to kind of say what I hear you describing and what I, know to be true as well, is that it's almost bittersweet. Like, the Christians will point to scriptures where vengeance is mine, saith the Lord, and I will recompense, I will repay evil for evil, that you're not to repay,
Mhm.
and they'll point to it and they'll absolve themselves and say, well, it's not me. but the Lord's going to do it. But you bask in him doing it. That is wrong.
Yep.
So it's kind of bittersweet to where, let's say someone does you wrong, and it's nice to know that there's someone, there is a judge, there is a mediator, there is a reconciler that recompenses.
Mhm.
Um, I guess that's sweet in a way, but it's bittersweet because the heart of the Christian, the spirit should have you feel the same way God looks at, the same way Christ prayed, the
Mhm.
same way Stephen prayed, the same, that I don't want that to happen to them. You know, you understand what I'm saying? So it's
There's a reason
bittersweet
why we're
knowing he
told.
avenges, but not wanting him to
Yep.
avenge.
There's a reason why we're told not to take pleasure through the scriptures. Do not take pleasure in the fall of your enemy, lest
Mhm.
the Lord sees that and displeases him.
Right,
So
right,
when you're rejoicing that your enemy has gotten their due, rather than weeping, because we're all in the same mortal state,
right,
we've all offended.
right,
Therefore, we're all worthy of absolute devastation
right.
in its purest sense.
So stop there for a second, right? When the prophet asked David, "What do we do with a man that does this?"
Oh,
Does that not go along what you were just saying? So
yes.
so please share with the public.
So, um, for those that don't know, David was king of Israel, and he had taken Uriah. Uriah,
I think so.
I believe it was
Yeah,
Uriah's
yeah.
wife.
Bathsheba.
Yes,
Yeah.
and he had slept with her. She became pregnant, and to cover up his deed, he sent Uriah to the front lines of the most fierce battle to have him killed.
Mhm.
Um, so the prophet comes along and he says, "Look, there's a man who has 100 sheep." I'm just kind of paraphrasing
Right,
what the
right.
prophet says. The man has 100 sheep, and he's given all the land, and he sees a man with one sheep, and the guy with the king with 100 sheep goes and takes that one man's land and sheep. So the prophet says, "Well, what do you do with such a man?"
Right.
And David says that man should be killed. That man should be stoned. Lock him up. Take all that he has. Give it to
Right.
others. So the prophet says, "You're that guy." And I
Mm.
don't think we understand how often
Right.
we fit the mold of the very one we desire to condemn.
Right.
And that's
If God were to come to you and you're again, your heart is wrong, you're basking in the vengeance of the Lord, and the Lord says, "Look, I am here to avenge. I'm here to recompense. Here's a man that has done this, that, and the other." And you're like, "Yeah, that was done to me. Yeah, he did that. Get him, Lord, get him." He's like, "No, I'm talking to you. That's what you did to your
yes.
brother." Tables are turned. And all of a sudden, it's like, "Hold on, forgive me." The unjust judge, and
Hmm.
all those stories.
And I
Now it's
think
forgive me.
we do that in so many areas. I'll liken it to one that's readily available or easily viewable, which is adultery or fornication. We often look at the person who's doing it and says that person is detestable. Meanwhile, we've looked at people to lust after them, and in doing so, you become that very person that you
Right.
condemn.
Yep.
So if we see a man doing it
Right.
and he cheated on his wife, that's crazy.
Right.
We want vengeance. She
Right.
don't deserve that.
Right.
Meanwhile, you're the one who's continually looking after another woman,
Right.
while
Right.
you're married. And
Yep.
it's like, well, hold on now. Okay, so you want judgment for that man.
Yep. And Christ said there's no difference. Christ said there's no difference. If you looked upon her,
Mm-hmm.
you've already sinned.
Mm-hmm.
To lust after her. You've already sinned. So you're judging the man that commits the act carnally,
Yeah.
and you do it within the heart. But if it's in your heart to do it, you did it. If your eye looks, with lust, that's
Yeah.
still sin. You've
Even
still offended.
Paul made it clear, you, O fool, that judges, not knowing that
You've
you
never
do the
looked
same
upon a
thing.
woman to lust, right?
No, I
We're
never
not
have.
gonna talk about that.
I never have looked at a woman in
I
lust.
was gonna say, this doesn't come to this table. We're
My
talking
two
about
kids
other
were of the
people that do
immaculate
this.
conception.
Right.
um,
Yeah. Just a
but
little, because I know people were listening. They're like, "Oh, y'all are hypocrites. You guys are,"
oh
no,
no,
no, no. It
no, yeah,
it
this
it it, it
that's
hits home.
where I I don't take pride in sin, but I appreciate what I have done because it gives me kind of like a drawback. It makes me take a step back and say, well,
Hmm.
hold on now. Don't forget that you're just as guilty.
Right.
Before you wish
Plenty
on
of
them.
motivation to humble yourself, plenty of
Yes,
motivation to pray for your enemies, plenty of motivation to stay on your knees, plenty of motivation to have patience with your
to
brother.
genuinely want better for your enemy,
Right,
for those that oppose you,
right.
because if I say that they are worth punishment, then I'm condemning myself the more. Because when I look at what other people do, I try to internalize it. I try to look back on myself, and
Mhm,
many times there's an area where I can find where I'm doing something that is either mirroring what they're doing in a different manner, or that is just as repulsive.
mhm.
That is just as punishable.
Right,
Um, and it makes me kind of step back and say, "Well, hold on, man, help me to be a better example."
right.
And if it is a situation where I need to speak, I pray, Lord, give me the words. Give me the behavior. Give me the conduct, because
Right,
I've been in a situation where I've spoken to a man right words in the wrong manner.
right,
You know,
right,
and have had the pleasure of having the same thing done to me, so that I have an objective a measure to say, well, look, you see this, right?
right.
The same way you hurt them, that thing was brought back on you. So it makes you take a step back
Yeah.
and consider what you're saying, what you're doing. It really makes you go back to God and say, look, man, forgive them, help them,
Mhm.
you know, because you've helped me.
Right,
You've forgiven me. If there's still grace for me, Lord, please be patient with them.
right.
And outside of a spiritual interpretation, there's actually a great utility in hoping for good for those that are malevolent, for
Mhm,
those that do you wrong, for those that seem to be living a bad life, that is detrimental
mhm.
to society. Um, if you can bring that one person to do good, then they affect those around them.
Right,
And each one that they affect affects those around them.
right,
So in hoping and trying to and doing good to that one, and trying to bring them to do good, you exponentially better the environment.
right,
You better the society. Instead of hoping that they receive evil, which only hardens the heart.
right,
You know,
right. So, and I don't we see you can't talk about this without kind of kind of transcending this topic or tiptoeing or stepping on the toes of
hmm
several subtopics. Um, I thought of like 10 things along the way, that we're talking about how to treat your brother, that's a Christian.
hmm
Because there we've talked about the different scriptures and the things that the church doesn't want to, kind of deal with for lack of a better word. This is driving me crazy. Okay, now we're good. Um,
OCD much?
yeah, yeah, yeah. I looked at my desk yesterday. I had cleaned everything in here. I looked at my desk and everything was straight and organized. And I'm like, this looks like a psycho works here. And I'm not that I don't want to say I'm not that clean, but I'm not that things get chaotic over there a lot. But when I clean it, I have to have the remote and the hard drives all
I'm gonna put boxes around it all.
right, like tape. This is where that goes. Um, what was I saying? So there's there's unfortunately there's enemies. We're talking about praying for your enemy, right?
hmm
And at the same time we're talking about the parallel or the similarity or the equality between the enemy and you, the
hmm
likeness, the things that we share and why we ought to care about their demise or whatever. Um, so with that being said, the enemy could be in the church or out of the church. It could be a brother. David said it was the one that I walked into the sanctuary of God with, or whatever you
hmm
call it. The one I worship with every day, the one that we enjoyed to walk in the ways of the Lord and all that. And man, I could have dealt with it if it was anyone else.
hmm
And I think everyone has experienced that and can understand that sentiment when it comes from within. It's like when a family member does something to you, before you know Christ or whatever, and it's just, family. When family does something, it stings a little bit,
hmm
because that was supposed to be your safe place. But nonetheless, so it happens within and without, iniquity, transgression, whatever you want to call it, sin, faults, vices, they exist within and without. And there's a fine line to tread between Um, we all fall short. We're all human. We all need Christ,
Mhm.
right? But so there's a fine line between acknowledging that and then like the First Corinthians, the fifth chapter,
Mhm.
that everyone's like, I think it's First Thessalonians, the third chapter is it? No, Second Thessalonians, the third chapter. I can't remember off the top of my head, but um, basically scriptures that tell you not to fellowship
Mhm.
with Christians that have such conduct. You know, and I don't. That's a separate topic of its own, and I would love to take the time to focus on that.
Mhm.
But I guess all I'm saying is there's like a lot of subtopics we touch on, and we have to put everything in its
Yeah.
proper place because, like, just like for instance, reading that, we're just putting off everyone because they've done
But
something, or
even
not putting off anyone.
even with that though, what is the spirit behind it? It's not disfellowship them because they are no good, they're evil.
Right,
They do evil, but the purpose is that they may repent, that they
right.
may understand that this is wrong,
To
and
realize
that
they've
it
done
puts
wrong.
them in danger
Right,
and others. Again,
right,
it's not just you that you're putting in danger.
right,
It's others because there's others that will be taken away from by that conduct.
right.
As we see in scripture, false prophets arise and men who esteem themselves arise
Yep.
and they draw away others after themselves. But it's ultimately to save your soul, not to condemn you.
Right.
It's not put him out the church and we have nothing else to do with him. It's look, put him away that he may be ashamed. But if that man repents, then draw him back in.
I admit, you know, we came into church, at the same exact time, and so we've experienced, pretty much the same exact things. And so I know we've been through situations that we haven't done it right.
Hmm.
And also even within the collective trying to talk to each other, there wasn't really a right answer. It was either one or the other.
Hmm.
And there wasn't, the proper balance, the line in between the two. But so I understand the difficulty to find it, but I don't know, we seem to polarize. It
Yeah.
seems to be, well, I'm a Galatians 6:1 type of person. Ye which are spiritual, restore such a one in the spirit of man. That's right, right one, right?
Hmm.
Okay. Um, or you're Jehovah Witnesses and Catholics, and you're just excommunicating anyone
Vengeance
that
with a
does
flame of
anything wrong.
fire.
And I
Yeah.
know as a person that, I've talked about this recently. I'm just as evil as anyone else. I have just as much potential, capability, nature, whatever you want to call it. Um, but everyone acts like, I think I'm holier than thou, or I'm trying to be a saint, and Sheree tells me all the time that, I expect too much from people. Well, that's actually what I expect of myself. So
Hmm.
I don't understand it. And the scripture talks about, thinking about the old man and being vexed, by the ways, the things you used to do and the things some people still do. It does vex you. It does trouble you.
Hmm.
And I think sometimes you forget that, yeah, I was there, I did that. Yeah, so I understood it at the time, and I should, have a little bit of sympathy or, empathy, either way. But nonetheless, it's not that I don't know. I deal with it with my kids. Same thing. Um, Someone does wrong, you should still be their friend. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And the excommunication, aside, but the problem I had wasn't with being a friend. It was the response that I would get from the church as to, we pretty much don't say or do anything. And I don't think a brother does that. And I didn't have an example to
Hmm.
tell me how to do it right. I didn't have an example, or I wasn't given the biblical principles, the right answers, the right pieces put together.
While you're looking at
Um,
scripture that says, at least at face value, to do something.
right. And the answer is kind of don't do anything. And so I've seen the fruits of that. And I'm like, well, I know what that creates,
Hmm.
because yeah. We're supposed to be accountable to ourselves, to God, and to one another.
Hmm.
And I think, but we don't know how to do that. And like I said, that's like a separate podcast topic of its own, because of how in depth it is. But I think it's like I said, it's a subtopic, or we tiptoe on it. It's a cousin to the conversation, or whatever you want to call it. It's related that, um, how to deal with people that do wrong, whether
Hmm.
they do you wrong or do God wrong, but that do wrong. And this is another example where if we have the wrong heart and wrong spirit or lack of understanding, we read one scripture for face value and like we bask in the vengeance of the Lord or we bask in
Mhm.
excommunication like Jehovah Witnesses and stuff. And um I don't know. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's another example where
Again, not considering our own selves.
right,
You know, ye that are spiritual restore such a one, considering your own self.
right.
Considering your own self. Is we have barely escaped judgment while standing in jeopardy of falling every hour. So consider that, yes, your enemy has offended you, but you also can offend God at any moment and be cast off.
Right.
At any moment you can miss the mark.
You should. You should
Yes.
be cast off. You know,
Yeah.
if you think about yeah, it's not just
Now that you can, yeah,
right.
you're right. You should.
So not that again, trying to find balance
Mhm.
because people can take this the wrong way and be like Opus Dei devoted and beating themselves and abstaining from life, marriage, food, joy, whatever, all because of guilt.
Mhm.
All because the recognition of their sins and the depravity that's in them, and so they punish themselves all the days of their life. And we're not talking about that. We're talking about the realization
Mhm.
of what is actually owed to you, what you actually deserve, and how gracious God is. And even if you didn't believe in God, how lucky you are. It's
Mhm.
called luck to those that don't believe in God, but that if you're whatever position you're in, I mean, if we're sitting here talking today, you ought to be thankful
Mhm.
because if the history of the world and the world today has proven anything, that you're lucky to be here alive, just standing here talking
That
and
someone's
not
not beating down your
experiencing
door.
right someone beating down your door, whether it's tyranny, whether it's a foreign enemy, whether it's sickness, whether it's
Mhm.
cancer, whether it's whatever famine, what there's about a million things in this world you could suffer from. So if you're,
That you should be suffering from.
right. So all of us, we should be thankful. And I just wanted to point out because it's not like, oh, by chance it could happen. It actually should.
Mhm.
So if you calculate, if you believe in God and you calculate, his ways, then according to his ways and according to what you've chose to do, you deserve the opposite of what you have today.
Mhm.
If you take him out and you say it's all by chance and I believe in karma and luck and all this other stuff,
According to the history of the
even
world.
by that, mathematically and probability, you still deserve suffering.
Mhm.
So you shouldn't have a good life for all intents and purposes. But anyway, let's stay within the believing aspect. I just wanted to, make the accommodation for
Mhm.
that view. But yeah, it should happen. And I think that's again recognizing that you are like the enemy, that you want to heap coals of fire
Mhm.
on his head. You are like him. You are that person. If you want to heap coals on his head, God or someone else should be just enough to heap coals on your head for being so very similar and so very guilty and so very deserving of the punishment you want someone else to receive.
Mhm.
So you ought to deserve it. And we have this entitlement in the faith like, well, why is this tragedy befallen me? Did I not pay my tithes or did I
Mhm.
forget to go to, the afternoon service or whatever it is that we get religious about? And we don't realize that, I mean, to be honest, yeah, I mean, you've done 1,000 things in your life that you
Mhm.
deserve punishment for. Um, I mean, did that, I don't know, I guess I'll
I mean, I think that
take a
does
step
a
back.
great job of illustrating the parallel or the likeness between, you and your enemy and why it is important, why it is why it's vital, and in many cases imperative. There should be an urgency, and why we should appreciate our enemies.
Mhm.
They're a reflection of you, and it gives you an opportunity to actually to intercede for them as Christ intercedes for you.
Mhm.
It gives you that the in our case the rare moment to be like your Lord,
Right.
to be like Christ,
Right.
to show that look, I understand the wretchedness of my own being and that I am worthy of judgment. So because you've helped me,
Mhm.
help them.
Mhm.
You know, I haven't done anything on my own to deserve it. Lord knows I've done nothing but given him reason
Right.
to cast me off. And it's
Why is it so easy to forget that? I feel like we've seen it 1,000 times over that the same people that come into the church wretched and undone, and that do, thank God, change their ways and get on a better path
Mhm.
and kind of, make something of their life. And but then the next person that comes in, you expected them to come in pristine, and you hate their ways. And I said, like I said, look, let's make the make
Not even the
let's
ways, we hate them
yeah,
many times.
we do show. I think it's subconscious. We hate that they remind us of us. And I think there's something to be said psychologically that they are
We hate the
you.
mirror.
They are you. They are who you were, and probably somewhere inside still could be.
Mhm,
And it's the reminder. I don't know. There could be something to be said about that, but long story short, we've seen it. The grace, the mercy, the deliverance, the aid that you received, you have no patience in someone else's walk. And you expected them to come in. And I was just, had a little Bible
mhm,
reading with the kids yesterday morning, and they that are well have no need of a physician.
mhm,
You wanted them to come to the hospital healthy? You wanted them, you know what I mean? Like, so you want your enemy to stay on, our enemy. They that are well. Is your enemy well? You know what I mean? Like, so he suffers or she. They suffer need. They need him just like you do. And
mhm,
if they're doing what they're doing, that's nothing but evidence of the help that they need. And you know this if you're the
mhm.
spiritual man. You know what I mean? So that's why I say it's only carnality that could let you bask in the vengeance of the Lord, or actually even view them as an enemy. Something bad happened to us recently, and we were pretty sure someone had something to do with it. I didn't harbor any resentment toward, because I'm like, you have no idea where we're going from here.
Mhm,
All you were was a catalyst. And just real quick, let's make a pit stop at the story of Joseph. What his brothers did to him,
mhm.
putting him in the pit. You know, the dream that he had and was naive enough to share with, his family, his brothers. And obviously his brothers respond as any human beings would. Like, why are you so special? Oh, okay, so you're gonna roll over all of us. Oh, you're the big bad boss,
Mhm.
and of course he's the baby brother, or one of them. I think there's one younger than him, but
But
yeah. So um they became his
mhm,
enemies. They threw him in a pit to die. And was it Benjamin that pleaded for him?
mhm.
And they're like, all right, look, we'll just sell him into, slavery, sell him, and so they'll take him away. So all of that they meant to harm you.
Hmm.
Judas putting Christ on the cross. He did it out of selfishness. He did it, for his
Mhm.
own, reasons. Malevolent. Yeah, whatever that word is. He did it maliciously. He did it with evil intentions. But what he meant for evil, because of that, Christ was not only ascended to heaven, but his blood washes you today.
Mhm,
That would not have happened without evil. And name drop Jordan Peterson's book, 12 Rules of Life,
mhm.
finding order in a world of chaos, or whatever the title actually is. I'll link it. But he does a great job showing the yin and the yang, and why it takes evil, why there's good in all evil, why there's some evil in all good, and how that relationship, works in this
Had it
world.
not been for Joseph being sold into slavery, there would have been no
They
salvation
would have
for him and his brothers.
starved. If
Exactly.
you know the end of the story, his whole family would have starved. You think the Pharaoh would have
Mhm.
just said, "Here, I'll help you, random people." It was because he knew that was his brothers and his family, and he was in position as basically second
Mhm.
only to Pharaoh, right?
Yep.
That never would have happened if they weren't first his enemy.
Had Judas not gave Christ over for his own selfish ambition,
Right,
had Judas not have given Christ over, there wouldn't have been salvation,
right,
that blood that was slain.
right.
But even in that story, I think we often miss, if you do what's right, even to your enemy, there comes a point where, in some cases, even your enemy recognizes they're wrong.
Absolutely.
Because Judas
Right,
was truly sorrowful afterwards,
right,
and I'm not an apologist for Judas,
right, right,
but
right,
it stands to be noted, to quote, give the devil his due.
right,
Judas wasn't running around saying, yay, Christ is on the cross.
right,
He ran back and said, look, I have forsaken innocent blood. Or,
right,
yeah, I have betrayed innocent blood.
right,
This man is innocent.
right,
I've done wrong,
right.
you know, and it,
Just like Joseph's brothers had that realization
yep.
and humility once they found out it was him, and the love and the grace that he
Hmm.
showed them. And Joseph, typifying Christ in many ways. There's absolutely a connection there, but it's the same exact thing. But Both of those men walked right while their enemies, had done evil to them.
Mhm.
They did what was right. They responded the right way. They didn't repay evil for evil. They didn't, lamb dumb to the slaughter.
Mhm.
Didn't say a word.
Didn't harbor animosity.
And this is why I said it's carnality to bask. I keep saying bask or to enjoy the
Mhm.
vengeance of the Lord or whatever. But Romans 15:4, the things that were written aforetime, if you know the story of Joseph, and now we know the story of Jesus, and now we know the story of the apostles, and all these
Mhm.
different stories. If you know them, the things that were written aforetime were written for our learning, so that through patience to let it take its course,
Mhm.
and comfort in the scriptures, we may have hope. So this is why, like, we see these stories, and that's why when I look at the person that I'm gonna say what it was, but the person that does me wrong, you know, I know how the story goes. Thank you, sir. And I'm not saying that like, oh, I'll pray for you, but thank you. You have no idea what's going to come from this. I do. You probably meant it for evil. I really don't care.
Mhm.
You probably meant it for evil. I see something good coming from this.
Yeah.
So I have no problem. And I know God. I know He's just. Even if I didn't see the possible outcome and didn't know how in the world it could work, I know how God works and that He's just. So if you meant evil against me and I didn't deserve it, you know, um, I know He's only doing something good.
Mhm.
And I just have to have that patience and endurance. And I don't know, like, I don't love the other person. I mean, it's good if you know them, then you should love them even if they do wrong to you. But I don't know them like that. So I didn't have love towards them. I'm not even gonna lie and say, oh, I just showed them love. Or
Mhm.
no, I didn't really show them anything because I don't know them. That's how weird the situation was. But I'm indifferent. I don't have any bad feelings towards you, where I have every right to
Mhm.
if we have that suspicion that you did something. But nonetheless, I mean, I want to at least point out that people are human. We make wrong mistakes. Sometimes we get caught up and we do feel some kind of way when someone does something to us, and just take it as a life lesson and just try to respond the next time. I had touched on Romans and I had touched on heaping coals of fire, and I
Mhm.
know you wanted to touch on that. So why don't you, go ahead and I guess pick up the ball and share with us about what, heaping coals of fire, because I know that's one that if someone likes the vengeance of the Lord, if someone wants vindication
Mhm.
and justice, they're like, oh man, I'll do this and I'll only be nice or I'll only do something kind because boy, it's gonna heap coals of fire on your head. You're gonna be mad.
Yeah. I'm I
Boy.
was actually more inclined to pass it back on this one. Only because I will say this. I think that if you're doing good to place a reward or a consequence on your enemy, then you're doing it out of the wrong spirit. You're doing it out of not necessarily necessity, but out of a desire for them to be punished.
Hmm.
So your good is actually evil. That quote good that you're doing,
Right.
if it's for the cause of punishing them,
Right. Right.
then it's evil.
Right.
That thing isn't.
Right.
It's almost like James references two different kinds of wisdom.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
yeah, it sounds wise,
Yeah.
but it's actually
It's
foolish.
earthly.
It
Yeah.
sounds good, but
Yep.
that is earthly.
Yep.
It's devilish. Um, but in looking at the phrase, heaping coals of fire on their heads,
Right.
um, I was more leaning towards the. There are two ideas, and I was leaning more towards one that seems relative, but not precise to what Paul's referencing, which
Right.
is why I would rather you explain, what you had saw when looking at
Got you.
the the two
Right.
prevailing theories.
Right. And I will push credit back to whoever that guy was, but um he pointed out something that I hadn't thought of. Of course, it's not a scripture that I particularly had broken down, and analyzed every word spoken. But it's like I agree with other Christians that I've seen and heard like their YouTube videos and stuff. They're not okay. And I think that's good that, you have the right heart. If you hear the context that it's often used at, like heap coals of fire on their head, like that'll show them, oh, they'll be burning mad or that'll get, well, that doesn't seem right. Well, I agree with that. It doesn't seem right because it's not right,
Mhm.
you know? Um,
It's like
s
saying Imma agitate them.
right. No, this will really
Imma
get them.
poke at them.
This will really get them. You know? Again, if that's why you're doing those previous things named, but that's because you're doing them because you want that outcome to agitate them further,
Mhm,
or to prevail over them in an earthly, carnal context,
mhm,
carnal way. Um, I don't wanna prevail over them. I want to prevail over the obstacle of hatred
mhm,
of an earthly enemy, of, that obstacle. I want to prevail over that. Um, and Abraham Lincoln said the only way to overcome an enemy, or whatever, is to make him a friend. You know, um, love conquers hate. Love supersedes hate. Light voids makes darkness
mhm,
void. Light overcomes darkness. So all of these things should be a zero, not zero sum, but a value of zero by themselves. Once the opposite and superior one comes, if it's hate, well, that becomes zero when love shows up.
mhm,
If it's darkness, well, that becomes zero. There's zero darkness once light shows up. So that's all I'm saying. But anyway, the guy shared, that there's um, two views as far as what heaping coals of fire refers to, and one of them was, the battle strategy that I'll say, if you are you have your fortress, and obviously this is like in more ancient times, not like today where they're flying drones and stuff, to drop bombs, but you have a bunch of men, and they're laying siege to your fortress. Well, one of the best methods, and you see it in movies, you see it in all kinds of things dated in that time period, is they do something along the lines of either coals or fire or,
mhm,
gasoline, some type of oil or something, tar, and dropping that and lighting the men on fire. And there's like no better way to stop a siege
mhm,
than just light them all on fire, and if they don't get caught on fire, they have to run because they can't climb the wall any further. So, there he was explaining how that's one of them, is to heap coals of fire, on their head to prevail in the war. But he didn't like the demeanor of it, because it's like, "Oh, I'll attack them."
mhm,
I'm just paraphrasing, but, the other one was he made a correlation between, the altar, the incense, and the coals of fire and the censer in the tabernacle, in the temple. And while the smoke going up is a sweet savor to the Lord and all that, and the only problem I have with that is I think the first one seems like it's in the wrong nature, the second one seems like a better nature, and I agree with that. But for one, what I was telling you, I don't see, heaping coals of fire to me isn't a correlation to the Romans about the temple in Jerusalem. You know what I mean? That's not something that he would have spoke to the Romans about. That's something he would have spoke to, Israelites in Jerusalem about. Even though you could argue that there was probably Jews, and or converted believers now that would have been familiar with the temple, at least to some degree. But I don't think that's how he spoke to the
mhm,
Romans to reach the Romans. He would have spoke to Jews in the Sabbath on the temple about the offerings and the incense in the temple.
mhm,
Um, I like the sentiment of the prayers of the saints, going up just like incense is a sweet savor to the Lord. And there's spiritual things today that are a correlation to those things. And I think that we can build
mhm,
from whatever Paul was literally talking about and reach something like that. But I don't think he was referencing that, like I told you. Um, I think what he's saying, he's speaking to the Romans who are very, very familiar with war, with battles, with carnal ways, period, just like he always did. And I think he was most likely, I can't say without a shadow of a doubt, but what I see is I see him referencing battle. And I see him saying that if you have a fortress, this is one of the best ways to prevail over an enemy
mhm,
by heaping coals of fire on there. And he references that. And if they're familiar with battle as Romans, like Roman soldiers and everything, would be very, very familiar with battle
mhm,
and battle strategies, they would know that that was like the number one way to protect your fortress and to
mhm,
keep someone trying to, So I don't think he's saying do it to throw fire on people. What he's saying is, like he did in many other passages, he referred to himself as a soldier of the Lord. He referred to it, to our ways as the weapons of our warfare are
mhm,
not carnal, right? So we're not in carnal battle. We are soldiers. We are in a war. principalities and powers and, all this, right? The armor of the Lord. He
Mhm.
spoke in war terminology throughout all of Asia Minor, all of Europe, wherever he went,
Mhm.
because they understood being a soldier, they understood battle. And I think he's doing the same thing here, but he's just saying that love is the way to prevail and send the
Mhm.
enemy running, to prevail in the war, to remove that obstacle of an enemy trying to do something to persecute you.
By
This
doing
is
this, you
how.
heap coals of fire or you neutralize.
Right, and you prevail.
Mhm.
Love prevails by doing the first things, named. You feed them, you clothe them, whatever the case may be, whatever their needs are, you love them. You don't repay evil for evil. You know, this
And notice he's
prevails
not
over
saying you
hate.
go out and you do these things. You go to them and you appear before them and just give them. Say,
Right,
look, when they need, because there will be need,
right,
you do this, you do that.
right,
So the one that was persecuting you, when they have need, you do good to them.
right.
And by doing so, you now neutralize the threat.
Man, I don't care how much someone doesn't like you. If they see at the end of the day, after all the church walks past you and says, "Praise the Lord," when you pay their light bill,
Mhm.
when you buy them groceries, when you pay their rent, whatever the case may be, when you're there for them, after all the handshakes and all that
Mhm.
just kept moving, they're going to know where the love is, and I'm not.
And that's not your testimony. You don't make that your
Oh, right,
testimony.
right,
You go
right.
out and I did.
But again, all the stuff that we mentioned, it's just the wrong heart, flat out. Um, I remember talking to a bunch of Christians and or at least being a part of a conversation and it was like, how do we teach people that? And while I understand the question is like, man, I kind of wanted to end there. So how do you love your enemies? How do you get the heart to love your enemies? And, you know, I guess there's an answer to it. I'm sure there's something we can say to answer to it, but part of me says in the background, it's not teachable. Part of me says it's not teachable. You either have the heart to do so or you don't. Can you get the heart? All right, that may be where the answer is. So how do you answer that? How do you have a heart to pray for your enemies righteously, the right way?
I think I think that from I think that understanding yourself, understanding your own nature, um, will it will reveal whether Christ is in you or not. I think that when Christ is in you, you automatic just like the the people who were referencing heaping coals of fire. It's like, man, there's something wrong here.
Hmm.
Though I may not understand exactly what it is, I know there's something wrong. And when you understand your own self, it's like, yeah, um, I pray for them because I'm evil. You
Hmm.
know, um, I think the only way to get the heart initially is to be converted.
Hmm.
I don't think that a man that's not converted has any true incentive to pray for his enemy. To a degree, because
Hmm.
there are some who do see the utility in doing good to a person that does you wrong.
Right.
And how
Right.
it can affect, how it can have a greater effect
So,
on
but they
community.
still see a benefit. So they do it because they see the benefit,
Hmm.
not because they're converted and it's the only way they
Yeah,
know. Like,
but a Christian understanding judgment and understanding the terror of the Lord,
right.
understanding that you offended, understanding your nature, or at least considering these things, is more inclined to pray genuinely for the person that offends them because I understand that I offend him.
Right.
I not only God, I've offended my brother,
Right.
I've offended my sister,
Right.
I've caused others to stumble.
Right.
So Lord, man, please be merciful with them because as long as you give them mercy, and I feel like they've done wrong,
Right.
man, there's a chance for me.
Right. And like the realization of you, I've done this, I've done that, I've done this, to them, to God, to whoever. Um, the thorn in the flesh, Paul.
Hmm.
Um, now that was literally said because of the abundance of revelation, and all of
Hmm.
that. So he didn't get above himself, I guess. But I don't know, doesn't it? In what you described in this is like us all recognizing a thorn,
Hmm.
the fact that we all have. some type of thing that's like the thorn in the flesh, that it may not be because abundance of knowledge or revelation, but at the very little, um, but for to create an abundance of mercy for our brother.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Like to bring you down a peg so you don't judge someone harsher than you'd like to be judged.
That's why you with your spiritual are able to restore such a one
Right.
in a spirit of
Right.
meekness because
Because you
you
see
understand.
that thorn per
Mhm.
se, or not per se, but um, um, so I don't know. Anything in closing? I mean, I would say fasting and praying. Like
That's
like you talked about being converted, and obviously
boy.
that's step one. But step two is like if you not to be, I hate because it comes off overly spiritual sometimes. And I would like to do something on just fasting and praying, just experiences, not just reading scriptures that anyone else could look
Mhm.
up. Um, but the benefit of just praying for one, the benefit of that when it comes to praying for your enemies is we've talked about this many times. I don't know how you can kneel before God and come to him about things and your heart not just be
Sh
devastated, and just
Shattered.
again like completely reset. So any animosity, any hate, any doubt, anything and anything bad towards anyone else is automatically neutralized. And all you can do is think, you know what? This situation here, can you forgive them? Can you help them see what they're doing and don't do nothing to them. They have no idea. They have the person that I think probably tried to do us wrong. They have no idea what they're doing, and they have no idea what could come their way
Mhm.
because of what they attempted. I don't want that to happen. They didn't know. I mean, so like I said, I mean, if you actually spend time in prayer and if you're actually self-aware, self-analyzing, reconciling with God for who you are not have been, but are today, and where you fall short and what your needs are from him. Like I said, I think it resets.
Mhm.
I think it completely resets and neutralizes so that I don't know, you can't truly pray for your enemy if you're not praying.
Mhm.
Like you can't just say, "Oh, Father, forgive them," just to say that prayer.
I think what I would well, not I think. What I would say in closing, what I will say in closing is to take a step back and to honestly examine yourself. Honestly consider the things you've done, the things that you do, the things that you think, the things that are hard to address
Mhm.
about yourself. Um, the areas where you think, "Oh, I wouldn't do that." Take a step back to honestly examine, to honestly consider who you are. And I think if you do that truthfully,
Right.
you'll get to a point where you have so much more compassion for those that do you wrong. And even if you're not the spiritual type, um, it'll humble you. It'll make you take a step back
Mhm.
before you're so quick to criticize or condemn others.
What are we missing? I don't know. I think we hit all the I don't know. That's a great way to close if there's nothing else. Yeah, I don't know. I think that's pretty much it. We've come full circle. We've hit a bunch of things in the process, and probably touched on a couple things that we could kind of expound on
Hmm.
in other episodes. But I don't know. So for those listening, for those watching, definitely would love feedback on this one, more so than others. Like a hot topic or whatever the case may be. Oh, what do you think about this? Is it right or wrong? No. How has this impacted you with the things talked about? Maybe you're one that already prayed for their enemies, and already had the right heart, and maybe it's just something along that spoke to you more, or what I mean, compelled you more, or did something else for you in the process. Or someone on the flip side, you always had a problem with that. Did any of this help? What's your thoughts? What's your views from that? Or if you have something to add, God knows with the scriptures, there's always more, so, um,
I know that with a book full of men who said, I'm undone."
mhm. Cloud of witnesses, cloud of witnesses of men that had the proper realization, you know?
Yeah.
And then you have great examples of the opposite. I told my dad this once, that a bad example is normally better than a good example. Seeing someone do wrong
Mhm.
can impact you. And if you learn nothing, you can learn from the Pharisees, at least what not to do. And they're the opposite of the men that you spoke of. They're the ones saying, I'm good as I am. Everyone else is bad,
Mhm.
and they wanted vengeance. They wanted to, people to die and all that, so yeah, I think we got examples both biblically, in abundance.
I would like to add though, definitely check out David and Saul.
Mhm.
Definitely check out David and Saul.
Right,
Um, it's we have an example of a man with an active enemy,
right,
constant, and would not harm that man.
right,
And even at Saul's death, David cried.
right,
That's if nothing impacts you or shows you the character, you know, um, that we should have.
right,
I think that definitely does.
right, right. See, I told you we can keep pulling them out. You know. All right, cool. Thank you for listening. This is Acts 2 and 42, and we'll come back to you next week. Thank you.